Tom wiped his hands on the old towel hanging from his belt and looked at his watch. 6:30 in the evening, and Lincoln Elementary was finally quiet. After working here for 15 years, he knew every corner of this building like the back of his hand. The classrooms were spotless, the hallways mopped until they shined, and every trash can was empty and ready for tomorrow's chaos. He loved his job, even though most people didn't understand why. Being a janitor wasn't glamorous, but Tom found real joy in making sure the kids had a clean, safe place to learn. Every morning when those school buses pulled up and hundreds of little feet came running through the doors, he felt proud knowing he'd done his part to prepare their world. Tonight felt different, though. All day, the sky had been getting darker and darker. The weather reports on his little radio had been talking about a big storm coming through the mountains, but Tom had seen plenty of storms in his 52 years living up here. This one, however, felt heavier somehow. The air was thick and electric, making his skin feel funny. As he turned off the lights in the last classroom, fat raindrops started hitting the windows. By the time he reached the main entrance, those drops had turned into a steady drumming. Tom pulled his jacket tighter and stepped outside, immediately feeling the wind trying to push him back through the door. His old blue pickup truck sat alone in the parking lot, looking small under the big storm clouds. Tom had bought that truck 8 years ago with his savings, and it had never let him down. Tonight he was going to need it to get him home to his little cabin up in the mountains. The drive started normal enough. Tom knew these winding roads better than anyone. He'd been taking this same route home for years, first in his old sedan, then in this trusty pickup. The road curved and twisted through tall pine trees, climbing higher and higher until it reached his peaceful cabin. But tonight the storm had other plans. What started as heavy rain quickly turned wild. The wind began howling like a living thing, bending trees until they looked like they might snap. Hail started bouncing off his windshield, small at first, then bigger and bigger until it sounded like rocks hitting his truck. Tom gripped the steering wheel tighter and slowed down. His windshield wipers were working as fast as they could, but they couldn't keep up with the water pouring from the sky. The headlights barely cut through the darkness and rain, making everything look strange and scary. He'd driven through bad weather before, but this was something else entirely. The storm seemed angry, like it was trying to wash the whole mountain clean. Tom could hear tree branches cracking and falling somewhere in the darkness. Every few seconds, lightning would flash, showing him just how bad things were getting out. That's when he saw something that made his heart jump into his throat. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Through the rain and darkness, his headlights caught what looked like a person walking along the side of the road. Tom blinked hard and leaned forward, trying to see better. It was definitely someone out there, stumbling through the storm like they were lost. But as Tom got closer, he realized it wasn't just anyone. It was a child. A little boy, soaked completely through, was trying to walk along the muddy shoulder of the road. He was moving slowly, like he could barely stay on his feet. Even from inside his warm truck, Tom could see the kid was in serious trouble. Without thinking twice, Tom pulled over and jumped out into the storm. The wind and rain hit him like a wall, instantly soaking through his jacket. But he didn't care about that now. There was a child out here who needed help, and nothing else mattered. The boy looked up when Tom approached, and Tom's heart nearly broke. The kid couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. His clothes were completely soaked, his lips were blue from the cold, and he was shaking so hard he could barely stand. His eyes were wide with fear and confusion. Tom recognized him immediately. This was little Kevin from the school, one of the 3rd graders. Kevin was always polite when he saw Tom in the hallways, always said hello and asked how he was doing. What was this sweet kid doing out here in the middle of nowhere during the worst storm Tom had ever seen? Kevin? Kevin, what are you doing out here? Tom had to shout over the wind and rain. The boy tried to answer, but his teeth were chattering so hard he could barely speak. Tom could see that Kevin was in the early stages of hypothermia. His skin was pale, he was confused, and he was shivering uncontrollably. If Tom had driven by just a few minutes later, or if he'd taken a different route home, he might never have found the boy. Without wasting another second, Tom scooped Kevin up in his arms. The child was lighter than he expected, and colder than ice. Tom quickly carried him to the pickup truck and gently placed him in the passenger seat. He cranked up the heat as high as it would go and wrapped Kevin in his own work jacket. "It's okay, buddy. You're safe now. I'm going to take care of you," Tom said in the gentlest voice he could manage. Kevin was still shaking, but Tom could see a little relief in the boy's eyes. At least he wasn't alone in the storm anymore. As Tom drove carefully through the dangerous conditions, Kevin managed to whisper a few words about what had happened. His family had been on a camping trip in the national forest. When the storm started getting bad, Kevin had left their campsite to find a bathroom. But in the wind and rain, he'd gotten turned around and lost. He'd been walking for hours trying to find his way back, getting more and more scared as the storm got worse. Tom's heart ached for the frightened child. He knew Kevin's parents must be worried sick, probably searching everywhere for their missing son. But right now, with trees falling and roads flooding, the most important thing was getting Kevin somewhere warm and safe. Tom made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. His cabin was still 20 minutes up the mountain, but it was warm, dry, and stocked with everything they'd need to wait out this storm. Once they got there and Kevin was feeling better, Tom would figure out how to contact the boy's family and get him home safely. The rest of the drive was slow and careful. Tom kept talking to Kevin, asking him about school and his favorite subjects, anything to keep the boy alert and responsive. Kevin's shivering was starting to slow down in the warm truck, which was a good sign. The color was slowly returning to his cheeks. When they finally reached Tom's cabin, it looked like a beacon of hope in the storm. The little log house sat surrounded by tall pine trees, with warm yellow light glowing from the windows. Tom had built this place to be his peaceful retreat from the world, but tonight it would serve a much more important purpose. He carried Kevin inside, where the wood stove was still putting out gentle heat from that morning. The cabin was simple, but comfortable, with everything a person needed to live quietly in the mountains. Tonight it would be a sanctuary for a lost child and the man who'd found him just in time. Tom's cabin felt like stepping into another world after the chaos of the storm outside. The warm air wrapped around them as soon as they walked through the door, and Tom could hear Kevin let out a small sigh of relief. But the boy was still shivering badly, and Tom knew he had to act fast. "Let's get you out of those wet clothes right away," Tom said, guiding Kevin to the couch near the wood stove. The fire was burning low, so Tom quickly added more logs and stirred it up until the flames were dancing higher. Kevin stood there dripping on the wooden floor, looking small and scared. His sneakers made little puddles with each step, and his clothes were so soaked they looked like they weighed more than he did. Tom hurried to his bedroom and came back with an old flannel shirt and some thick wool socks. "Here, put these on. I know they're way too big, but they're warm and dry," Tom said, handing Kevin the clothes. "There's a bathroom right through that door. Take your time and don't worry about anything else right now." While Kevin changed, Tom got busy in the small kitchen. He pulled out a can of chicken soup and started heating it on his old gas stove. The familiar smell of home cooking began to fill the cabin, mixing with the wood smoke in a way that made everything feel safer and more comfortable. Tom lived simply up here in the mountains. His cabin had just the basics: a living room with the wood stove, a small kitchen, one bedroom, and a bathroom. But everything was clean and well maintained, just like the school hallways he took such pride in. He'd built most of the furniture himself over the years, and every piece had a story. When Kevin came out of the bathroom, Tom had to smile despite the serious situation. The flannel shirt hung down to Kevin's knees like a dress, and the sleeves went past his fingertips. The wool socks came up almost to his knees. He looked like a little kid playing dress-up in his dad's clothes. "Much better," Tom said, wrapping a thick quilt around Kevin's shoulders. "Now let's get some warm food in you." Kevin sat on the couch, pulling the quilt tight around himself. The shivering was finally starting to slow down, but Tom could see the boy was still scared and confused. His eyes kept darting to the windows every time the wind howled or something crashed outside in the storm. "My mom and dad, they're probably looking for me," Kevin said in a small voice that broke Tom's heart. "I know they are, buddy. And we're going to get you back to them as soon as it's safe," Tom replied, stirring the soup. "But right now this storm is too dangerous for anyone to be out there. The best thing we can do is wait for it to pass." Tom brought Kevin a steaming bowl of soup and a mug of hot chocolate he'd made with milk and cocoa powder. Kevin's hands were still shaking a little as he held the warm mug, but Tom could see the color starting to come back to his cheeks. "Tell me about your camping trip," Tom said, settling into his old recliner with his own mug of coffee. "Were you having fun before the storm hit?" Kevin nodded, taking a careful sip of the hot chocolate. "We were staying at Pine Ridge Campground. My dad taught me how to tie different knots, and my mom showed me how to identify different kinds of birds. We saw a family of deer yesterday morning." As Kevin talked, Tom could see the boy starting to relax a little. Talking about good memories seemed to help chase away some of the fear, but every time the wind rattled the windows or they heard a tree branch fall, Kevin would stop mid-sentence and look around nervously. "You know, I've lived up here for almost 20 years, Tom said. "I've seen a lot of storms, but they always pass. This cabin has kept me safe through all of them, and it'll keep us safe tonight, too." The soup and warmth were working their magic. Kevin was no longer shivering, and his voice was getting stronger, but Tom could see exhaustion creeping in. The boy had been through a terrifying experience, and his body needed rest. "I should try to call my parents," Kevin said, looking around for a phone. Tom shook his head gently. "I don't have a phone up here, buddy. And even if I did, the cell towers are probably down in this storm. But don't worry. As soon as the weather clears, we'll get word to them that you're safe." Kevin's face fell a little at this news, but Tom was quick to distract him. "Hey, want to see something cool?" Tom got up and went to a shelf near the window. He came back with a pair of binoculars and a thick book about wildlife. "During the day, I like to sit by that window and watch the animals. Just last week, I saw a black bear and her 2 cubs playing in the clearing behind the cabin. And there's a family of foxes that live in the old oak tree over there." Kevin's eyes lit up with interest. Tom opened the wildlife book and started showing Kevin pictures of all the different animals that lived in these mountains. They saw photos of elk, mountain goats, various birds, and even a few wolves that had been spotted in the area. "Have you ever seen a wolf?" Kevin asked, leaning closer to look at the pictures. "Just once, about 3 years ago," Tom said. "I was sitting right here having my morning coffee when I saw this big gray wolf come out of the tree line. He looked right at me through the window like he was saying hello, then disappeared back into the forest. As the night went on, the storm outside seemed to get even worse. They could hear the wind howling like a wild animal, and every few minutes, another tree would crash down somewhere in the darkness. The power lines had probably been down for hours, but Tom's cabin didn't depend on electricity. The wood stove kept them warm, the gas stove worked for cooking, and he had plenty of oil lamps for light. Kevin was fighting to stay awake, but Tom could see the exhaustion winning. The boy's head kept nodding forward, and his eyes were getting heavy. "Why don't you try to get some sleep?" Tom suggested. "You can take my bed and I'll stay out here by the fire." "I'm not really tired," Kevin said, even as he yawned. Tom smiled. "Well, how about we both just rest here for a while? I'll keep the fire going and you can stretch out on the couch." Tom arranged the pillows on the couch and helped Kevin get comfortable under the thick quilt. Within minutes, the exhausted boy was fast asleep, his breathing deep and peaceful. Tom sat in his chair, keeping watch over the sleeping child and feeding the fire throughout the night. Every hour or so, Tom would check on Kevin, making sure he was warm enough and breathing normally. The boy slept deeply, finally safe and warm after his terrifying ordeal in the storm. Tom found himself thinking about Kevin's parents, imagining how worried they must be, but there was nothing anyone could do until the storm passed. As dawn approached, the wind finally started to calm down, but Tom could see through the windows that the damage was extensive. Trees were down everywhere, and the road to his cabin was probably blocked in several places. It would be at least another day before they could safely make the journey down the mountain, but Kevin was safe, and that was all that mattered right now. Down in the valley, 40 miles away from Tom's cozy cabin, panic was spreading through Pine Ridge Campground like wildfire. Kevin's parents, Lisa and David, had been searching for their son since the storm began 3 days ago. What started as a simple bathroom break had turned into every parent's worst nightmare. Lisa sat in the ranger station, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee she hadn't touched in over an hour. Her eyes were red from crying and lack of sleep. She kept staring at her phone, hoping against hope that it would ring with good news. David paced back and forth behind her, running his hands through his hair for the 100th time that morning. "He's just a little boy," Lisa whispered to the ranger sitting across from her. "He's never been away from us for more than a few hours. He must be so scared." Ranger Johnson had been coordinating search and rescue operations in these mountains for over 20 years, but cases involving children always hit him the hardest. He'd seen too many families torn apart by the wilderness, and he was determined not to let that happen here. "We've got every available team out there, ma'am," he said gently. "The storm slowed us down for the first 2 days, but now that it's clearing, we can really expand our search." What Ranger Johnson didn't tell Lisa and David was how worried he really was. 3 days in the wilderness during a major storm was a long time for anyone, let alone an 8-year-old child. The temperatures had dropped close to freezing, and hypothermia could set in quickly for someone Kevin's size. Outside the ranger station, the parking lot looked like a small army base. Search and rescue vehicles filled every space, their radios crackling with constant updates from teams spread across the mountain. Volunteers had driven in from towns as far as 50 miles away, bringing supplies and offering to help in any way they could. Captain Rodriguez from the state police was running the operation from a mobile command center. Maps covered every surface, marked with different colored pins showing where teams had already searched and where they planned to look next. The search area was enormous. Thousands of acres of dense forest, steep cliffs, and winding trails. "We need to expand the grid pattern," Captain Rodriguez told his team leaders. The boy could have traveled much farther than we initially thought, especially if he was trying to find his way back to the campground. The search teams were made up of professional rescuers, local volunteers, and even some specially trained dogs that could pick up human scent even after days in the rain. Each team had specific areas to cover, and they moved through the forest systematically, calling Kevin's name and looking for any sign that he'd passed through. But there was something the rescue teams didn't know, something that would have changed everything about their search strategy. Kevin's family wasn't just any ordinary camping family. David worked as a research scientist for a major pharmaceutical company, and his recent breakthrough in childhood cancer treatments had made him quite wealthy. The family had been trying to enjoy a simple camping vacation, but their story was more complicated than anyone realized. Back at the campground, news vans had started arriving as word of the missing boy spread through social media. Lisa tried to avoid the reporters, but David knew that publicity might help bring Kevin home. He agreed to a brief interview with the local news station. "Please, if anyone has seen our son Kevin, he's 8 years old with brown hair and he was wearing a red jacket when he disappeared," David said into the camera, his voice shaking with emotion. "He's a sweet, gentle boy who loves animals and science. We just want him home safe." The interview was broadcast across the region, and soon people who had never heard of Pine Ridge Campground were sharing Kevin's photo and story online. Tips started pouring in from all over the state, though most led nowhere. Someone thought they saw a boy matching Kevin's description at a gas station 60 miles away. Another caller reported seeing a child walking along a highway, but it turned out to be a different missing person case entirely. What frustrated the search teams most was how the storm had washed away any tracks or signs that Kevin might have left behind. The heavy rain had turned dirt trails into mud, and the wind had scattered any broken branches or disturbed vegetation that might have shown which way he'd gone. "It's like he just vanished into thin air," said Jake, one of the volunteer searchers who'd been combing the forest since dawn. He and his team had covered over 10 square miles in the past 2 days, following every trail and checking every cave or shelter where a scared child might hide. The search helicopters were perhaps the most impressive part of the operation. When the weather finally cleared enough for flying, 3 helicopters took to the skies equipped with heat-sensing cameras that could detect a human body, even under thick tree cover. The pilots flew in careful patterns, covering every inch of the forest canopy while ground teams worked below. From their aerial view, the pilots could see just how vast and unforgiving this wilderness really was. Miles and miles of dense forest stretched in every direction, broken up by steep ravines, rocky outcrops, and fast-moving streams swollen by the recent storm. Finding one small boy in all of this seemed almost impossible. But the search teams refused to give up. Stories of miraculous rescues kept them motivated. Children who had survived for days in the wilderness who had been found just when hope seemed lost. Every searcher carried that hope with them as they pushed deeper into the forest. Lisa's sister had driven up from the city to be with the family during this terrible time. She tried to keep Lisa eating and drinking, knowing that her sister needed to maintain her strength. "Kevin is smart and resourceful," she kept saying. "Remember when he got lost in the mall last year? He found a security guard and gave them our phone number. He knows what to do." But this wasn't a shopping mall with helpful security guards and clear exit signs. This was raw wilderness where a wrong turn could lead to a deadly fall, where streams could sweep away a small child, where wild animals roamed freely through the darkness. As the third day of searching came to an end, Captain Rodriguez gathered his team leaders for an evening briefing. The mood was somber as they reviewed the areas they'd covered and planned the next day's search pattern. They were running out of places to look in the immediate area, and soon they'd have to start considering the possibility that Kevin had traveled much farther than anyone thought possible. "Tomorrow we expand the search radius by another 5 miles, Captain Rodriguez announced. "I know it seems overwhelming, but we're not giving up. Somewhere out there that little boy is waiting for us to find him." None of them knew that Kevin was safe and warm, sleeping peacefully in a small cabin high up in the mountains, being cared for by a kind janitor who was doing everything he could to keep the boy comfortable until the roads cleared enough for them to make the dangerous journey back to civilization. The search would continue for several more days with hundreds of dedicated people refusing to give up hope, never knowing that the answer to their prayers was just miles away from where they were looking. The morning of the 4th day brought something neither Tom nor Kevin had seen since the rescue: sunshine streaming through the cabin windows. Tom woke up in his chair by the fireplace, his neck stiff from sleeping sitting up. He'd kept the fire going all night, just like he had for the past 3 nights, making sure Kevin stayed warm and safe. Kevin was still asleep on the couch, wrapped up in the thick quilt like a little burrito. Tom smiled, watching the boy sleep peacefully. It was hard to believe this was the same terrified, shivering child he'd found stumbling through the storm just a few days ago. Kevin's cheeks had color in them now, and he looked relaxed and healthy. Over the past few days, something unexpected had happened. Tom had started to feel like Kevin wasn't just a lost child he was helping. He felt like family. Tom had never had children of his own. He'd been married once, years ago, but his wife had wanted to live in the city while Tom loved the quiet mountains. They'd divorced amicably, and Tom had chosen his simple life in the cabin over starting a family. But having Kevin here had awakened something in Tom that he didn't even know existed. The protective feelings, the joy in teaching someone new things, the satisfaction of seeing Kevin smile when he was scared. It all felt so natural and right. When Kevin woke up, the first thing he did was look around for Tom. "Good morning," Kevin said with a sleepy smile that melted Tom's heart. "Morning, buddy." "How did you sleep?" Tom asked, already moving toward the kitchen to start breakfast. "Really good. I dreamed about my mom and dad, but it wasn't a scary dream this time. I dreamed we were all having breakfast together," Kevin said, sitting up and stretching. Tom felt a pang in his chest. He was happy Kevin was feeling better, but he knew that soon they'd have to leave this peaceful bubble they'd created. The roads would clear, and Kevin would go back to his family where he belonged. Tom would go back to his quiet cabin and his job at the school, and this magical few days would become just a memory. "The sun's shining today," Tom said, cracking eggs into a pan. "I think the storm might finally be over. We should be able to get you back to your parents soon." Kevin's face lit up with excitement, but then something strange happened. His smile faltered a little, and he looked almost sad. "That's great," he said, but his voice didn't sound as happy as Tom expected. While they ate breakfast together, scrambled eggs, toast, and hot chocolate for Kevin, they talked about the past few days. Kevin had learned so much during his time in the cabin. Tom had taught him how to properly tend a fire, how to identify different bird calls, and even how to whittle simple shapes from pieces of wood. You're a really good teacher, Mr. Tom, Kevin said, carefully buttering his toast. You explain things in a way that makes sense. Sometimes at school the teachers talk too fast and I get confused. Tom felt a warmth spread through his chest. You're a great student, Kevin. You listen carefully and ask smart questions. That's the most important thing in learning. Kevin looked down at his plate, seeming to think about something serious. Mr. Tom, can I tell you something that I don't usually tell people? Of course, buddy. You can tell me anything. Kevin took a deep breath. Sometimes I feel really lonely, even when I'm around lots of people. At school, the other kids think I'm weird because I like reading about science and I don't like playing the same games they do. And my parents, they love me, but they're always so busy with work and important stuff. Tom's heart ached for the little boy. He recognized that feeling of being alone in a crowd, of feeling different from everyone around you. You know what, Kevin? There's nothing wrong with being different. Some of the most interesting and important people in the world were the ones who didn't fit in with everyone else. Really? Kevin looked up with hopeful eyes. Really? And you know what else? These past few days talking with you and teaching you things has been some of the best time I've had in years. You're not weird at all. You're curious and thoughtful and kind. Those are wonderful things to be. Kevin beamed at this, and Tom could see the boy's confidence growing. They spent the morning looking through Tom's collection of books about nature and science. Kevin was fascinated by everything: the way plants grew, how weather systems worked, why certain animals lived in different parts of the mountains. My dad works with medicines that help sick kids, Kevin said as they looked at a book about plants that could be used for healing. He's always telling me about how important science is for helping people, but he's usually too busy to actually show me stuff like this. Tom listened carefully as Kevin talked about his family. It was clear the boy loved his parents deeply, but there was a loneliness there that Tom recognized. Kevin's parents sounded like good people who worked hard and provided well for their son, but maybe they were so focused on their important work that they sometimes forgot to simply spend time with him. Your parents sound like they do really important work, Tom said gently, but I bet they'd love to hear about all the things you've learned up here. Maybe you could teach them some of what I've taught you. Kevin's eyes lit up at this idea. Could I? Do you think they'd want to learn about bird calls and fire building? I think any parent would be proud to learn something from their child, Tom replied. And if they ever want to come up here and see the mountains, they'd be welcome any time. As the day went on, they could hear the sounds of melting snow dripping from the roof and trees. The storm was definitely over, and Tom knew it was time to start thinking about the journey down the mountain. But first, he wanted to check the roads and make sure it was safe. Tom had an old battery-powered radio that could pick up the local emergency broadcasts. When he turned it on, they immediately heard news about the massive search operation that had been going on for Kevin. Search teams are expanding their efforts as the weather clears. The missing 8-year-old boy was last seen at Pine Ridge Campground 4 days ago. Kevin's eyes went wide as he realized just how many people had been looking for him. All those people are looking for me? He asked in amazement. Your parents love you very much, Kevin, and so do a lot of other people who don't even know you, but want to help bring you home safely, Tom explained. Kevin was quiet for a moment, processing this information. I feel bad that everyone's been so worried, but I'm also really glad I got to stay here with you. Is that wrong? Tom's throat tightened with emotion. No, buddy, that's not wrong at all. I'm glad you stayed here too. These have been some of the best days I've had in a long time. As they prepared for the journey down the mountain, both Tom and Kevin felt a mixture of excitement and sadness. Kevin was eager to see his parents and let them know he was safe, but he didn't want to say goodbye to Tom. And Tom was happy to help reunite the family, but he knew he was going to miss Kevin terribly. Will I ever see you again after today? Kevin asked as Tom packed supplies for their trip. Tom knelt down to Kevin's eye level. I sure hope so, buddy. You'll always be welcome here, and I'll always be your friend. Sometimes the best friendships are the ones that happen when you least expect them. Neither of them knew that this was just the beginning of a friendship that would change both of their lives forever. 3 days had passed since Tom had safely delivered Kevin back to his frantic parents at the ranger station. The reunion had been everything Tom had hoped for. Tears of joy, tight hugs that seemed to last forever, and the overwhelming relief of a family made whole again. Tom had quietly slipped away from the celebration, declining interviews from the news reporters who had gathered to cover the story. Now he was back at his cabin, trying to settle into his normal routine. But nothing felt normal anymore. The cabin seemed too quiet without Kevin's curious questions and infectious laughter. Tom found himself looking at the couch where Kevin had slept, remembering how the boy had looked so small, wrapped up in that big quilt. The books they'd read together still sat on the coffee table, and Tom couldn't bring himself to put them away. He'd gone back to work at the school, but even that felt different now. Every time he saw children Kevin's age in the hallways, he thought about the special bond they'd formed during those 4 incredible days. Tom had always cared about the kids at school, but now he felt a deeper connection to them, understanding how much they needed adults who truly listened to them. On this particular morning, Tom was sitting on his porch with his usual cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. The forest around his cabin was peaceful, with only the sounds of birds singing and a gentle breeze rustling through the pine trees. This was his favorite time of day, when the world felt calm and full of possibilities. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in his quiet mountain morning. It started as a distant humming, gradually growing louder and more distinct. Tom set down his coffee cup and stood up, looking around for the source of the noise. It was definitely mechanical, and it was getting closer. Then he saw it emerging over the tree line, a helicopter, sleek and expensive-looking, flying directly toward his cabin. Tom's heart started beating faster. Helicopters didn't come to his remote corner of the mountains unless something was seriously wrong. His first thought was that there might be another emergency, another lost hiker or camper who needed help. The helicopter circled his cabin once, then slowly descended toward the small clearing beside his property. Tom had never seen a helicopter land so close to his home before. The powerful rotors whipped up dust and pine needles, bending the nearby bushes and making Tom squint against the flying debris. As the engine wound down and the rotors slowed to a stop, Tom could see people inside. The aircraft. The door opened, and the first person to step out made his breath catch in his throat. It was Kevin, looking healthy and happy, wearing new clothes and a huge smile on his face. But Kevin wasn't alone. Behind him came a woman with kind eyes and an anxious expression, clearly his mother. Then a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, followed by another man carrying what looked like important documents. Tom recognized Kevin's father from their brief meeting at the ranger station, but he looked different now, more formal, more businesslike. Kevin broke away from the group and ran straight to Tom, throwing his arms around the surprised man's waist. "Mr. Tom, I missed you so much. I told my parents all about you and everything you taught me." Tom hugged the boy back, his heart swelling with happiness at seeing Kevin again. "I missed you too, buddy. How are you doing? Are you feeling okay?" "I'm great, and guess what? My parents want to talk to you about something really important," Kevin said, practically bouncing with excitement. Kevin's mother approached with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Tom, I'm Lisa, Kevin's mother. I can't even begin to tell you how grateful we are for what you did for our son. You saved his life." Tom felt embarrassed by the praise. "I just did what anyone would do, ma'am. Kevin's a special boy, and I'm just glad I was able to help." Kevin's father, David, stepped forward and extended his hand. "Tom, we need to talk. What you did for our family goes beyond just saving Kevin's life. You gave him something we didn't even realize he was missing." Tom looked confused. "I'm not sure I understand." Lisa smiled through her tears. "Kevin hasn't stopped talking about you since he came home. He told us about the things you taught him, the way you listened to him, how you made him feel important and valued. He said you were the best teacher he'd ever had." Kevin nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Tom taught me about birds and how to build fires and how to identify animal tracks. But more than that, he made me feel like being curious, and different was a good thing." David gestured toward the man with the documents. "Tom, this is our family lawyer, Mr. Peterson. We've spent the last 3 days learning everything we could about you. We know about your background, your education, your work at the school, and your financial situation." Tom felt a wave of discomfort. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand why you would need to know all that. I didn't help Kevin because I wanted anything in return." "We know that," David said gently, "and that's exactly why we're here. Tom, I run a large pharmaceutical company that develops treatments for children with serious illnesses. We have the resources to do something meaningful, and we want to honor what you did for our family in a way that will help many more children." Lisa pulled out a folder and handed it to Tom. "We're starting a foundation in your name. The Tom Henderson Foundation for Child Education and Safety. We want you to run it." Tom's hands shook as he opened the folder. Inside were documents outlining a foundation with more money than he'd ever imagined. Millions of dollars dedicated to helping at-risk children, funding outdoor education programs, and training adults to be better mentors for young people. "This can't be real," Tom whispered, looking at the numbers on the pages. Kevin grabbed Tom's arm excitedly. "It's real, Mr. Tom, and there's more. Tell him about the other thing." David smiled at his son's enthusiasm. "We're also building you a new home, Tom. Right here on your property, but bigger and better equipped. You'll have space for hosting educational programs, guest rooms for visiting families, and a proper workshop for the hands-on teaching you do so well." Tom looked around at his simple cabin, then back at the documents in his hands. "But why?" "I don't understand why you do all this." Lisa sat down on Tom's porch steps and patted the spot beside her. Tom sat down, still clutching the folder. "Tom, Kevin came home different after his time with you. He was more confident, more excited about learning, more sure of himself. In 4 days, you gave him something we'd been trying to give him his whole life. You made him feel heard and valued," David added. "And when we realized that, we also realized how many other children might need that same kind of attention and care. We want to create opportunities for more adults like you to connect with kids who need mentors." Kevin climbed up onto the porch and sat on Tom's other side. "Plus, now I can come visit you all the time. My parents said we can come up here for vacations and I can learn more about the mountains and animals." Tom felt overwhelmed by the generosity and kindness of this family. "I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever dreamed of." "Say you'll accept it," Lisa said softly. "Say you'll help us create something beautiful that will help children for years to come." Tom looked out over the mountains he loved, then down at Kevin's hopeful face, then at the parents who were offering him a chance to make a real difference in the world. Sometimes life changes in an instant, in ways you never see coming. "Yes," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll do it." The helicopter that had brought unexpected visitors to his mountain cabin was about to carry Tom into a completely new chapter of his life, one where his simple act of kindness would ripple outward to touch thousands of other lives in ways he was only beginning to imagine.